All right, so then we'll talk about cryptographic attacks. Brute force is the simplest one, where you just try every possible key, like trying every possible password. This is, if your algorithm does not have any flaws, this is what you have to do, and it's the slowest. It will, of course, always work if you have enough time to try every possible key. And like I say, you cannot try 2 to the 100 keys ever. So if you have 100 bits for a symmetric key or 2048 bits for an RSA key, that's enough that you'd be perfectly secure here, unless somebody found a shortcut where they don't really have to try all possible keys. And social engineering is commonly the case. You trick the human into handing over the key. That's always a weak spot, and humans are very often the weak spot. Another one is to use rainbow tables. This is a way to speed things up by using more memory to save time. So instead of doing repeated calculations, you calculate a bunch of it once and you just look it up in a table. This worked pretty well against Windows XP's password hashes, but it's not very practical for modern hash algorithms. Another is known plain text. If you know some of the plain text, then that often gives you a shortcut. This is what happened to wireless encryption, because in wireless networks, most of the traffic is ARP packets. The ARP packets are almost all the same, and they're the shortest packets, so it's easy to find them, and you can guess a whole bunch of what it is, because they always have a lot of boilerplate stuff. So a known plain text attack is used to crack wired equivalent privacy, among other things. And then there's chosen plain text. If you can feed in data and it will encrypt it for you, then you can feed in specific data that might give you information about the key, like maybe all zeros, all ones, all zeros except 1, 1, and other chosen things to plain text that differ only by 1 bit. There's a lot of ways to feed in patterns of plain text that will reveal information about the key if the algorithm isn't strong against that. And there's a bunch of these, like the padding oracle attack and many other attacks. Meet in the middle attack, if you can somehow split the process in half, where you do half of the encryption and you can get the intermediate result, then you, instead of trying to crack like a 128-bit key, you can crack a 64-bit key for half of it and another 64-bit key for the other half, making it much faster. This is why you use triple DES, not double DES. If you did 2 rounds of DES, then it would be no more secure than an unrounded DES, because you could just crack each half individually. Triple DES means one side, even when you meet in the middle, one side still has 2 keys of DES. So it doubles the key size from 56 to 112 bits and makes it much stronger. And of course, you may have some knowledge about the key. The key might be based on a dictionary word. One thing that keeps happening is people use a random number generator, but the random number generator has a flaw, so you can limit the possible outputs. This keeps happening. Another thing that keeps happening is people keep copying example code and using it, including copying the example demonstration key that is well known. They don't randomize it. This keeps happening over and over. So, yeah.
When I was using my Apple passwords, I noticed they have like a very seemingly predictable way of providing passwords, and I was wondering if that was.
Oh, you mean if you lose an Apple password, how do you recover it?
Well, the way if you auto-generate a password with Apple and then it has like 3 chunks of letters, and it seemed really predictable, so I was wondering if that.
I don't know. I know that VMware will auto-generate an encryption key. Apple has, I don't know if the Apple keychain will automatically generate passwords. Yeah, most password managers will. And you're asking if that's really random?
Well, because Apple's is always like the same format, at least when I had an iPhone, where like 3 letters and dashes in between, whereas I have a password manager that you can pick your own like features.
Yeah, if there's some kind of pattern, then of course that would lower the entropy. It might be all right, but yeah, this is actually a big issue. If you have a random password generated by some algorithm, you wonder if it's good enough. And I think I haven't heard of password managers generating bad passwords, but I think I did hear about it years ago, an old one. And logically, there shouldn't be any pattern to it for maximum utility. If they do put letters and then dashes and then numbers, then they'd have to make them longer to get the same hardness. I don't know why they'd do that, but they could. I know Microsoft activation keys are like 5 groups of 5 letters with dashes, and they come from an algorithm. And that algorithm has leaked, and people could generate fake ones. It's a problem, yeah. Making random numbers is actually very difficult. Right, so like I mentioned, this is a technique that was considered a military secret until, I think, until SHA-1 was out. So maybe about 2 decades ago, it leaked out that you could encrypt plain text that are almost identical, and by analyzing statistical output, you could deduce a lot about the key. A lot of algorithms were vulnerable to this attack, differential cryptanalysis. And then there's, of course, side channel attacks we've talked about, where you measure the time it takes to encrypt something, the radio signals emitted by the processor, the power consumption of the processor, and these can give you a clue about the key. If you're doing a calculation, if it's multiplying by 0, it skips it. If it's multiplying by 1 and adding it, it has to do more work, so it'll take longer if the key has more 1s. And it'll be faster if the key has more 0s, that kind of thing. And then, of course, there's implementation flaws. This keeps happening. The system leaves a copy of the secret in RAM or in a temporary file or on the hard drive somewhere, and this is how the cold boot attack works against BitLocker. You can get a computer that is not turned off but is like in a suspend state, and you can freeze the RAM and put it in another machine and find the key in there. And that's the thing, then all this cheats. You don't have to try every possible key. That's like I say, the best case for cryptography is you have to do a brute force attack. You really have to try every key. There often is a shortcut where you don't have to try every possible key. That's usually how you break in. And for hash functions, one thing to understand is the birthday attack. There's something you do in classes. If you have 23 people in a classroom and you just get everybody's birthday, like month and day, there's probably 2 of them with the same birthday. And at first you'd think that wouldn't happen until you had like 160 people to have half as many people as there are days in. But the problem is any pair could match. I could match you, I could match her, you could match her. So if you have 23 people, there's 253 pairs of people. That's 253 chances for the birthday to match. And there's only 365 birthdays, so this is more likely than not. And therefore, so if you have MD5s and just calculate MD5 hashes of a bunch of files, by the time you have done 2 to the 64 calculations, you'll probably find a collision. You only have to get up to the square root of the number of possible hashes before one of them will probably collide. And that's why the hash function has to be twice as long as you might think. So MD5 is not long enough at all, because 2 to the 64 is not an impossible number of calculations to do. That's why we moved to SHA-1 that was 160, and now SHA-2, which is typically 256 bits. So digital signatures, this is what we use to sign a document. You have a document like a loan agreement. You calculate a hash. Then you encrypt it with a private key, and that's the signature. Since you used your private key, the only person that can do this is the holder of the private key. That tells you who signed it, and everybody can verify it because your public key is well known. So everybody can verify that you signed it, but nobody could duplicate this because they don't have the private key. So this provides authentication, integrity, and non-repudiation, but it does not provide confidentiality. It's just a signature attached to the document. If you wanted to have confidentiality, you'd have to also encrypt it with AES or something. The purpose of a signature is not to conceal it. It is just to verify that you signed it, that you agreed to it. So you verify it, you get the message, calculate the SHA-1, and decrypt it with the public key and see if they match. Decrypt the signature of the public key, and if they match, that means that the document has not been modified and that this person signed it, which is what you need for like a legal agreement. So message authentication codes verify the authenticity of a message, and they provide integrity and authenticity. CBC MAC is a common one. HMACs are hashed message authentication code that uses a hashing algorithm and a secret key. So it provides authenticity and integrity. This is used a lot for financial transactions. And so the public key infrastructure manages these digital certificates that have the public key. This is why if you go to Google, you need PKI to say, what is Google's public key anyway? Well, you go to a trusted repository of public keys that certifies this is really Google's public key and not somebody else's. That's the game. The most common form is just the servers are authenticated, but the clients are not. So Google and Yahoo and stuff are authenticated, but the people connecting do not have a secret key. You could have a personal public key and private key pair, and then you could have mutual authentication. And this is, I think, what those common access cards do in the military, but most of us don't have those. So you got certificate authorities that issue and revoke certificates containing public keys tied to companies. You got registration authorities that are associated with this. Then you got certificate holders that can sign documents, clients that validate signatures, and repositories that hold their certificates and the revocation lists of certificates that are no longer to be trusted, which is the weak part of the system. The revocation lists don't work very well. So you have to protect your private keys, but you have to back them up or you'll lose them in a server crash. So what you can do is use key escrow, where you break the key into chunks and put chunks in different locations so that the other people have only part of the key, but you can reconstruct the key from what they have. SSL was the original system made by Netscape. It's no longer considered secure. Now everyone's using its modern replacement, TLS. And so the handshake goes like this. You do SYN/SYNAC ACT, open port 443. Then the client sends a hello saying what cryptographic algorithms it can use. And then the server sends a hello picking an algorithm. And then you do a client key exchange. And then you make a private key at both ends, and then you use AES from then on. And not shown here is you also sent this certificate to a trusted third party to verify that this is really the right certificate for the server you're talking to. It's a pretty complicated process. So IPsec is an encryption routine designed for IP version 6, and it's very complicated. It's considered quite secure. It has authentication headers and an encapsulated security protocol and ISACAMP and key exchange algorithms. The authentication header acts like a digital signature for the data and does not provide confidentiality. The ESP is the one that encrypts the packet data. So you make, in IPsec, you establish a security association, a one-way connection between two servers, so you typically have to make two of these. And if you're using both authentication header and ESP, then you have to have 4 certificate security associations. Like I say, it's very complicated. Bruce Schneier wrote a paper about it. He said, it's so complicated, I can't do a thorough analysis of it. He thinks it's secure, but it's very complicated. So this manages the security association creation process with a security index, identifying them with 32 bits. You should just know the generalities of this. The details are not going to matter for a CISSP level. You just need to know which terms are associated with this. There's a tunnel mode used by gateways, encrypting the entire packet, and there's a transport mode that encrypts the data but not the headers. And it's very hard to understand why you have these two modes. And Bruce Schneier came out and said, you should just use tunnel mode all the time. And why do you even have this other mode where you don't do as much encryption? Anyway, so you do the internet key exchange using a variety of algorithms. And pretty good privacy is the one that Phil Zimmerman made in 1991, which was a way for everybody to use RSA encryption, and it got him in a world of trouble until they dropped the case in 1996. One thing about this is he did not have a bunch of certificate authorities, which are commercial companies selling certificates. Instead, they had a web of trust where you would have key signing parties where you just say, I vouch that I know this person, that's really them. And so you'd have trust a friend of a friend, a chain of friends to tell you who somebody really was. Very clumsy, very inaccurate, never became very popular. SMIME is used to attach binary files to emails, and there's a secure version. MIME is encrypted. And there's escrowed encryption, where other people have parts of your key so you can reconstruct it. There's also something that's come up many times. They keep trying to pass a law where the government has to have all the private keys. They've tried this many times, and Microsoft even built into their operating system the ability to send the private key to a third party all the time in case the government passed that law, but it never passed in America. But somebody's always pushing for it. Now they're pushing for it in Europe. It keeps coming back every couple of years. Government says, why do people have encrypted messages? We should be able to read everything. And, in order to do that, they'd have to have a copy of all the private keys. And then how much do you trust them to really protect it? They keep losing stuff. Anyway, it hasn't passed yet, but the battle goes on. The Clipper chip was the one, the US government put this out in 1993. It used, they were going to build it and everything. They were going to put it in telecommunication devices, and it turned out to be insecure and was abandoned. Steganography is a form of encryption where you have a covert channel, you hide something in a file, and you don't even know there's a message in it. So it looks like just a picture, like a picture of a cat, but hidden in there is a text message in subtle color changes or something. This is what Anna Chapman used to smuggle the message. She came to Washington as a Russian spy, seduced the generals and politicians, and snuck her secrets back to Russia with steganography, and the only reason they were able to crack it is she left her laptop behind when she fled. They caught her, and so they got a program off the laptop to see how she was doing it. Anyway, all right. And another related thing is digital watermarks, where you want to somehow mark an image or a music file so you know what it is, and if somebody copies it, you know what copy was made. And they're now trying to put marks on AI-generated images and music so you can tell they're AI-generated. And so far, it's not working very well. All the techniques to put a mark in there, there's a way to take the mark out, as you would imagine. But many people would like that to work. Right now, it's not working. Anyway, let's do 3H. That'll be the last bit of lecture today. Then we'll just do these student presentations. So, all right. All right, so what attack defeats two dash, double dash? Yeah, meet in the middle. You break it into two halves, and each half is only a single dash now, so it's much easier to crack. All right, what attack deduces the key from electric power consumption? Side channel attack. All right. What system ensures the authenticity of public keys? That's the public key infrastructure, the servers and companies that work together so you can tell who you're talking to on the internet. All right, what system uses AH and ESP? IPsec. All right. Good. Let me stop the recording then.